Hello, in this video we will see what is a compiler provided constructor and default constructor. In the last video we saw how to create a constructor. So by this time you may know how to create a constructor. Let's say if a class is not defining any constructor, so in that case compiler adds a constructor for us. So this makes creating the object without any problem. So if we write a class and if it doesn't provide any constructor, then compiler provides one and the user of the class can create the object. So the compiler provided constructor is called default constructor. That means we can say that if we don't write any constructor, then compiler provides a constructor and it provides a default constructor. So default constructor does not take any parameters. So we know that the constructor does not return anything to the caller, but constructor can take parameter. But when we talk about default constructor, it does not take any parameter. So if we don't write a constructor, then compiler provides one. So it provides a default constructor. Let's see an example for this. Here, if you see in this class, we created a class called C.2d with two internal members, private int x, private int y. These are all the two private members. Then we have a print method which prints the content of those two private members. And if you see here, the constructor is missing. So in this case, the compiler will provide a default constructor. Since compiler provides a default constructor, the code like this will be possible. So the code will be in the right hand side. Look at code snippet 4. The statement at line 5, C.2d pt1 equal to new C.2d. So such a statement is possible. Here the statement right side of the equal to invokes the compiler provided default constructor. Okay, let us see this in Eclipse. And if you see at line 6, we are making a call to print, and we will see what is the value of x and y. What value compiler keeps, the compiler provided constructor keeps in that internal members. So we will execute and see the default value in x and y assigned by the default constructor, the compiler provided default constructor. Here we have two Java files. One is a C.2d and another one is a default C.demo. So we already kept a breakpoint in main, and there is no constructor here. So let us execute this. So this is the class loader. So that's all. So it landed up into the compiler provided constructor, but which is not shown in this debug window. But by this time, if you see, the PT1 is get initialized, so we can see that through variable window. See, x and y is initialized to 0. So if we print in the console window, you will be seeing 0, 0 as x and y coordinate. X is 0 and y is 0. So that's how the default constructor initializes the value. So if we keep a boolean, that will get initialized to false. We will check that once here. So if you see, we kept a boolean variable, and if you look at, it will be initialized to false. So likewise, you can know the default for other members. You can put a float value and other primitive types to decide what is the default. Okay, we just explored this example in Eclipse. Now we know that if we doesn't provide any constructor in a class, the compiler will provide a default constructor. So what happens if we provide a constructor with a parameter, with single parameter or a double parameter? So the compiler first looks for the user provided constructor. So if our class has a constructor, then it gives precedence to that constructor. So if a user tries to create a object with without any parameter, then the compiler will throw an error stating that such a constructor is not available. So simply speaking, if you provide any one constructor, then the compiler won't provide its default constructor. Yeah. So when we don't write any constructor, compiler will provide, and we call that as a compiler provided default constructor. So let's add a constructor to our previous example. So this is the constructor we are going to add. So now C.2d accepts an integer as a parameter. The moment we add a constructor, as shown here in the left side picture, we get a compiler error for the below statement. So the user of our class tries to create an object like this, new C.2d without passing any parameter, the compiler will throw an error. So previously we have this statement, and just now we saw in Eclipse it executed and it constructed the object and it put a value x and y as 0. But once you provide C.2d, this will restrict the user to use this constructor. So if they want to construct an object, then they should pass at least one parameter. So that's the only version of the compiler, only version of the constructor, and the user should use that constructor to construct the object. Okay, we will add this constructor and we will see how the compiler throws an error. Okay, here we added a constructor, and if you look at here, this statement is started throwing error now. Once I save it, you can see that error here as well in the problems window. The error is the constructor C.2d is undefined. So what happened to the compiler provided a constructor? So the compiler revokes the constructor. So once we provided our own constructor, the compiler revoked the default constructor, which doesn't take any parameter. That's why the statement here got failed. If I go and comment this, toggle comment. So if I comment and save it, we will not see this error. This means now compiler provides a default constructor that doesn't take any parameter. Alright, so we will put back this. So the only way to initialize now is we have to pass some value here. So if we pass a 5, we can rectify this error, and now if we execute it, it will initialize the value by invoking our constructor. You see, the constructor is now initialized using the value passed in. So both members x and y initialized with the value of 5. Okay, so just now we saw that by introducing the constructor like this, public C.2d, the user of our class not able to create object the default way, like the one shown here in the right side. So that statement got failed. Let us see how to overcome this. So we can replace the constructor provided default constructor with our own version. So once we start writing the constructor, the compiler won't provide one. But if we don't have any constructor, then compiler provides one. So if we want to create a constructor which does not take any parameter, then we will be overriding the default constructor. So this is the way we can replace the compiler provided default constructor. So we know in what situation compiler provides a constructor. It provides a constructor when we don't write one. So if we write one which doesn't receive any parameter, then we are overriding the compiler provided default constructor. So this will make our users to create object like this, but this time it doesn't initialize the value to 0, 0. I mean we can initialize whatever value we want as a default behavior. Say for example, if compiler provides 1 integer values, integer variables, it will initialize it as 0. Boolean, it will initialize it as false. If it is float, that will also go to 0.0. So if we provide our own version of the default constructor, then we can initialize whatever value we want. So here is an example of user provided default constructor. Here we initialize the value of x and y with 11. So if it doesn't write this, then and if we don't have any constructor at all, then the compiler will initialize this as a 0, 0. Let us see this in Eclipse. So first we are removing the constructor here. Once we remove this, we will get an error. Haven't saved it. If I save, you can see the error. Then I'm providing a default constructor. So this will get away from this error and we can initialize our object. Now if we save, this will allow us to create the instance, and let me execute this. So if you see here, it created it landed up into our constructor and initialized the value with x11 and y11. We can keep a breakpoint here and to see it lands here to prove it. Let me debug it again. Let me see, it lands here and initializes the value with x11 and y11. In the console we can see x equal to 11 and y equal to 11. So just now we saw how to override the default constructor. In this video first we saw how compiler provides a default constructor, then we introduced a constructor with a single parameter, and then we saw how the compiler provided constructor is suppressed by providing our own version of constructor. Then here in the last form of the constructor, we created a constructor with 0 argument. Thanks for watching. Bye.